Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and I thought it would be really fun today to talk more about writing. And this will be more in the context of writing things like stories and fiction and creative work. However, it can definitely also be applied to creating things like content for a business or other types of creation. When I think back to the little assortment that I have of short fiction, flash fiction, and slightly longer fiction that I've written over the decades, there are some patterns and trends, but there's not one concrete answer to the question, where do story ideas come from? Now we can branch off into the philosophical about where creativity and ideas actually stem from. I think that many of the edgier stories that I've written have come from dreams, including things like a flash fiction zombie story that I wrote a while ago, an extremely short 2-page flash fiction about a young boy playing a violin on a rooftop just before being killed by intruders. Those came from dreams that I had. Also, some of the erotica tales that I have written have stemmed from a conglomeration of weird twists that I thought would just be really fun to play with in the context of a story, like a siren who requires being dunked into water every so often just to keep her land legs, while being also simultaneously kept as sort of a pet by a not very benevolent fiendish creature who was using her for her powers. And still others have grown like beanstalks, where I had the seedling of an idea, like a fascination with a particular location. In one instance, it was the caves in Cappadocia, or perhaps a fascination with a certain type of being or creature or character, such as Inanna or Morgan Le Fay. But many of the stories actually just sprang to life on their own once I moved the pen to the page and gave it free rein. The characters sometimes create themselves, whether from the depths of my own imagination or as some kind of unholy meshing of my life experience with something interesting that I've read or I've seen or I've witnessed. Some have been more philosophical in nature and pondered a question like, what would happen if someone's shadow was chasing them, but they thought it was actually some kind of an external monster, only to realize that it was truly themselves? None of these are necessarily completely original concepts. Many of them are almost part of the collective unconscious. But pulling them out, sort of extracting them out of the ethers and playing with the idea can be a lot of fun. And I would say that one of the key things that has really helped me with writing and creating over many years of time is to be willing to be playful with an idea, to release attachment to thoughts like, is this actually interesting? And to just temporarily assume that it is, or worrying, will other people like this? And to just temporarily assume that yes, they will. Or am I actually up to this idea in terms of my own skill level as a writer? And that one still gets me stuck sometimes, so I have to make myself suspend my own disbelief and my own ability to just give it a whirl and just see what happens. Sometimes I'll get part of the way in and then start thinking, nope, this is actually too big for me. I don't quite fit in these shoes just yet. Or I recognize that I need to first do a significant amount of research in order to nail a topic appropriately, and I just don't have the capacity to do it right then. And so sometimes it's easier to start with topics that are really very familiar to you already. And you may be surprised at how much something you know about is actually deeply interesting to other people who don't know about that thing. We often underestimate our own wisdom and insight as being just boring or very everyday because we take it for granted that other people already know what we know and have seen what we've seen and have landed on the insights that we've revealed. But often that is just your critic coming out to play. And so when we're creating, you have to temporarily put that critic in a cage, put it under house arrest for just a little bit of time, and temporarily ignore him, because otherwise he will completely stifle everything good that you can create. Now, we will need him back later on in the process when it comes time to actually edit and crop and change and fix things. But for the first few drafts, we need to tap more into the dreamer self, the dreamer state. And that is the part of us that has suspended judgment, does not care about the logistics, and is not bound by rules and logic and worry. It's the part of us that is capable of peeling back the floorboards and then peeling back the world and then pulling out a magical creature from the ethers. And when the time comes, both the critic and the other part, which is the planner self who understands the logistics, they will become useful, but just as a matter of getting started, just as a matter of sparking the creativity and getting into that flow state to create, we have to take the critic and the planner, put them into a nice little box, and just play with the dreamer for a while, just for a short time, just for today, just long enough to let something new and interesting flow without worrying about the outcome, without worrying about whether anybody else will ever see it or will like it, without worrying about whether it's truly possible or feasible to pull the whole thing off. Those pieces matter too, but they don't matter at first. It's difficult to get something off the ground when the critic and the planner are in that driver's seat. And I also find that in the creation process, it's very helpful to tune into just one type of energy at a time. It helps to prevent exhaustion. Much of the exhaustion that people sometimes experience with things like content creation comes because they're trying to do everything at once. They're trying to write the content, figure out how to schedule it and plan it onto social media or whatever platform they're publishing it, determine the best day and time, the best location, thinking about things like strategy and SEO, all of which are useful. But in the initial stages of creation, only the dreamer mind is necessary to conjure the idea. The planner and the critic have their role, but I find it helpful to create first, then crop, and then decide on the schedule. You can do it in whatever order you like. If you are a little bit more close friends with the planner, for example, you can conjure up the planner and decide the schedule first. But do make sure that you put him back in the box and take the dreamer out when you're creating. And the critic, most of all, is the one that we kind of need to suspend, because everybody has an internal critic and he's very useful, and everybody has the capacity to envision a critic or to imagine people receiving their work with distaste, with hostility. We're all well accustomed to trolls. We're all well accustomed to critical comments and critical commentary, but that doesn't mean that they have a place when we are going into our creation mode. In our creation mode, when we are attempting to step into a flow state, and we've talked about flow state as being this really magical place where the self-judgment, the self-doubt, the self-criticism really takes a back seat. Things just flow organically, ideas flood in easily, and we're capable of tremendous innovation and creativity. In that state, we are primarily working with the dreamer. Now, you can let in little pieces of the critic or the planner where it's relevant, but I really find that in the very early stages of birthing something new, it is truly the dreamer who has suspended the judgment, who has put the critic and the planner away just for a little bit of time, can become the most powerful for conjuring exciting and juicy new ideas. At some point, they all have to work together cohesively in order to produce something and actually not only get the idea for it, but actually create it. Do the writing, do the editing, do the publishing, do the planning and the scheduling and the strategizing and all of the logistics that go into it. There's nothing wrong with tapping into those energies as well, but they are separate and distinct energies. And sometimes when we allow them all out at the same time, it can feel very overwhelming and it can truly stifle our creativity. So my invitation to you today is invite in your dreamer for tea and just allow your mind to actually roam and create and play. And don't take it too seriously at first. Give yourself even just a few minutes where it truly doesn't matter what the outcome is. Allow yourself just a tiny little slice of time where your imagination can be wild, where the outcome and the opinions of others are irrelevant, and your dreamer can play. And then you can decide when and if you're ready to invite in the planner and the critic. I hope you found this helpful, and until we connect again, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.